Okay, it is 4 o'clock. We're going to call this meeting to order. And I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. And I would also ask if everyone would put their phones on mute so that we don't have phones ringing in the middle. Okay. The very first motion is moved by Susan and seconded by Craig that the agenda for the council meeting held April the 25th, 2023 be approved as presented. Are there any amendments, Kathy?
No, there are not, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so as presented, all those in favor? Carried. Oh, I might need a pen that writes. Mine is either that or it's just cold. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof of any item on tonight's agenda by any member of council? Seeing none, we'll note that in the minutes. Next, moved by Craig Middleton, seconded by Susan Irwin, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held April the 11th, 2023 be approved as presented. Any discussion on the minutes? Errors? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Okay. Mayor's remarks. Don't have a lot of remarks, but I do have a declaration that I am very proud to read to you right now. And that is moved by Susan and seconded by Craig. Whereas Community Living Month is a provincial annual community awareness initiative that's highlighted in the month of May. And whereas since 1976, Community Living North Frontenac has been inspiring possibilities, supporting and empowering people with intellectual disabilities and their families to build a just and inclusive society in North and Central Frontenac Townships. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Central Frontenac hereby declares the month of May as Community Living Month. And further, that the council thanks the dedicated Community Living North Frontenac staff and volunteers who help enrich the lives of our residents. And prior to the meeting, we had a photo shoot at the back. We probably had, 20 people in the photo. So hopefully Jeff Green will get it in the news. He missed the photo shoot, by the way. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. And the office will be shining.
They're up.
They're up now?
Yes.
Green, blue?
They're the green and blue. Isn't that?
Green and blue? Okay. Thank you, Council. All right. Now we are going to move right on to staff reports. There's no deferred items.
No.
And the first report is financial. So moved by Susan and seconded by Craig. The council received the check distribution reports totaling $956,714.23 as prepared by the treasurer for information. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of paying the bills. Motion's carried. Apportionment report moved by Susan and seconded by Craig that council approve the following apportionment of assessment as recommended by impact for 2022 and 2023 as applicable for the following roll numbers. And there's a number of them there. Any question on any of these roll numbers or properties? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Budget to actuals moved by Craig and seconded by Susan that the council accept the revenue and expenditure budget to actual variance report for the period ending March 31st, 2023 for information. Michael, do you want to speak to any of the areas?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. Just to give the new council an overview of what I do typically on the budget to quarterly report is I'll print it, look at what point we're at in the year, whether we're 25% in this case or 50% of it's June. See what revenues are more than 75% left to collect and what expenses are less than 75 left to spend. I do notify department heads of any concerns that I see, and we discussed that. There are a couple situations where some 2022 expenses made it into 2023. They're not big dollars, The graphs that I have in there are just to give us an idea, comparing March to March, year over year for the last 5 years. You can see that we're relatively similar. The spikes where there are spikes is generally if there's a grant and sometimes a lot, it's timing, when we can get the budget passed, when we can get the money spent. So even though there may be a spike, it may not be a concern. It's just timing. Bank interest right now is we've earned half of what we budgeted in a quarter of the year. So that's a good one, but that doesn't mean that we can go and spend that. There are seasonal expenses, heat and hydro, that when I look at them compared to last year, they look a little bit higher. But when I look back 5 years, they're relatively in the middle of the market there. And same with sand and salt. So, and on the one graph, you'll see GG or general government is negative. That's just because that's where we are OMPF or Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund of 2.2 million comes out of. And there's a lot more revenue going in there than expenses. So that's why the graph is below.
Okay. Any questions by anyone or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. That's excellent report. And I think I've said before, when you get the package, if you do have a question, don't hesitate to call the treasurer and ask what it's about. Okay?
Definitely easier with everything up on my screens and can go into a little bit more detail.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Michael. Okay. We are at Fire and Emergency Services. Moved by Craig and seconded by Susan, that council receive for information the CFFR report, including January and February stats dated April 25th, 2023. Questions or comments for Chris? Chris, any comments on the activity that you have for us?
Your worship, the fire ban was lifted today. I can tell everybody that. So now we think that we're working in conjunction with Tay Valley and South Frontenac and North to be consistent with the fire ban. So they lifted theirs yesterday, so we lifted ours today. So that's.
I'm sure that the snow coming later today will probably help as well. It's so cold out there. Okay, all those in favor? Carried. It was timely to have the band on because things were very dry. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Moved by Susan and seconded by Craig, that council received for information the CFFR report, including March stats dated April 25th. Nikki. Sorry, Chris, we need you back for March.
Chief, is this report complete? Because compared to the previous report, this one ends at the end of Sharbert Lake, showing no calls in Parham yet again, and it doesn't have a total at the very bottom. So I'm wondering if it got cut off when it was printed.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Gowdy. Yes, probably it might have happened. I'll have to follow up with that. Been a little short staffed lately, so I haven't really been able to keep on top of things as I should. So
yeah, it kind of stood out that. Well, first of all, as you know, I was going to question where were the calls in Parham, but when there was no total at the bottom, I thought, no, there's a problem with the report.
for sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Philip.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to also ask, with the Piccadilly Hall substation, does it fall? It falls under Parham, but how would we know, or do we track if that vehicle goes out on its own, or not on its own, but it goes out to a call?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Smith. I believe so. Yes, that would be a separate item on dispatch, and that truck would be identified as not attached to Parham, but attached to Piccadilly.
But we never see it on any of these reports.
We would if
But
it was going out.
But it does go out.
Yeah, it's been out once, I think, since about for a tanker assist about 3 weeks ago. But that's the only time I think I've seen it. I think it was on the report, though, I believe.
No.
No? All right, we'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
As well. Thanks.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of the motion? Carried. Now we are at administration. Moved by Susan and seconded by Craig, that council confirm the name Whiskey Street for the small section of road currently addressed as 14,321 Road 38 and the change of name of a section of Elf Patterson Road south of the intersection with Elf Patterson Lane to Oak Bluffs Road per the proposed draft bylaw attached to this report. And further, that council consider passing said bylaw later in the meeting. So the second one is more a correction. And the first one, Whiskey Street, is a new name. Any discussion? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Nikki, go ahead.
I'm wondering, should it be called a lane, not a street? Because are we going to maintain it now? Are we, because it's not a very well-built road?
Right.
Are we going to maintain it, or should we put it as a lane that we don't have to bring up to municipal standards?
So, sorry, are you referring to Whiskey, or Whiskey has always been maintained by the township as far as I know, so it is a municipal maintained street, so lane denotes more of a private or unmaintained private road.
And the same with Oak Bluffs. It's a township road.
So yes, Oak Bluffs is a township road, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the Whiskey, what they're talking about, Whiskey Street is just up at the bridge there where Ethel Wan used to live. And that is a street that we always maintained. Okay, but it only went into her house, really. Because I mean, there is another
one of
place
those.
in there, but it's not far in, so where Papineau's are.
Yeah. Okay, all those in favor? Carried. All right. Joint RFP for the Integrity Commissioner, moved by Craig and seconded by Susan, that council received the report, joint RFP for Integrity Commissioner report for information, and for the council authorized the CAO clerk to work with the county and participate in a joint request for proposal for Frontenac County Local Municipal Integrity Commissioner. Any discussion? It's always better to go together and get a better deal often.
Yes.
All those in favor? Carried.
They have to sharpen their pencils.
All right, we're moving right along here. Change meeting time from 4 to 6, moved by Susan, seconded by Craig, that council received the report, proposal to change of meeting time from 4 to 6, prepared by the deputy clerk for information, and further that regular council and committee of adjustment meetings start times remain at 4. Regular council and committee of adjustment meetings start times remain at 4.
Mhm.
That doesn't sound right, but anyway. And further that if council decides to change the meeting time to 6 p.m., that the decision be deferred until the second meeting in May to allow staff time to provide more details on costing and the impact it will have on the budget. Discussion. So this is a motion to defer. Nikki.
I just wanted to just mention the fact that if we're, the keywords out there are equity, inclusion, and diversity. And if we don't consider changing the time, it is making it so that you can't, other people that work, it is gonna deter people who work into not wanting to run for public office. We've talked for years, the past 4 or 5 years now, about it would be nice to have younger people involved. And with setting it at 4 o'clock, a lot of the younger people are working, and it will deter them from applying.
I'll just tell you, the past 30 some years, the meetings were at 7 o'clock years ago, and it was still basically retired people that were applying. I don't know, when we look at the candidates, we had 4 or 5 people who were employed that were candidates this year, maybe even more than that. So usually your employer is pretty good to accommodate you when you're doing something that's affecting the whole community, but every employer is different.
And years ago, when you did have them at 7 o'clock, the staff were not paid extra to go to meetings. It was understood that they went to the meetings without being paid extra.
Yeah, the labor laws have changed a lot. Cindy.
So are we discussing this or are we deferring this? Because before we get in a big discussion, we need to know what we're doing with the motion.
And we need to know what the costs are. So
That's right.
that's
We need a
basically,
breakdown of how many hours, how much per hour.
Yeah.
I'd like to see how it really is going to affect the township.
Okay. So let's vote on the motion then to defer this until the second meeting in May to allow staff more time to provide details on costing and the impact it will have on the budget. Okay, Craig,
But is that what the motion really says?
that
I think
is
the
what it
motion
says.
said that,
If council decides.
Receive the report, proposed to change meeting time.
I think
for
it says that we vote to see if we want it to stay at 4, and if it's not, then we give them
Yeah.
time to come back the second week of May to defer it.
It's not clear. The middle part says, and further that regular council and committee of adjustment meetings start times remain at 4. You're right. There's that part. And further that council decides, if council decides to change the meeting.
So I think it's I read that as a 2-part system. The vote is to remain everything at 4. If that vote got not accepted, then obviously the room feels it should start at 6. Then we defer the issue until May to get the proper information. And then have another vote once we have the information. Or how's everybody else read that? That's how I read it, that's what it says, but that's just me.
Well, and it's not a proper motion in that there's 2 different things. Really, the first motion should be that it remain at 4 p.m. and you vote on that, yes or no. If it's yes, if it's no, then the next part is that council get more information before they make the final decision.
We can do them as separate motions. if you
Yeah.
want.
That's how I read it, Madam Mayor.
Okay,
It might be a dull issue if it goes through that we just remain it at 4, then it's a non-issue. And if it doesn't, then I read that motion as it's deferred until the next meeting and they'll bring in the financials. That's how I read it.
okay. Yeah, I think you're right. Anybody else want? Cindy, you had your hand up.
If we do defeat the motion, then is the time not changed then? Because to me, that's saying, okay, so we decide we want this, but no, we're going to let it go back to staff so they can bring it back so we can maybe decide the next time to not want this. It's like giving you a double chance to turn it down is how I look at that.
I'm not the expert on these motions. Susan. Well, ask the lawyer.
Well, I think perhaps the motion should be amended and that we defer it so that we have all available information to make an informed decision.
So actually the and further should come out of the motion.
Yeah.
So the motion would then read that council receive the report and further that if council decides to change the meeting time to 6 p.m., that the decision be deferred until the second meeting in May to allow staff time to provide more details on costing and the impact it will have on the budget.
No, just this one first I would take this out and then we could do it as a separate
Okay.
meeting. Yeah. Separate motion. For the whole issue to defer.
Do you want to do it? Go
I
ahead.
feel it should be deferred so that staff. can
So
get-
move a
or gets more
deferral, move a
information
deferral.
back. What's that?
You've moved a deferral
I move to defer it until the meeting in May.
and a seconder. Nikki, all those in favor of deferring? Motion's carried. So it is deferred. We'll get some budget numbers and then we will discuss the pros and cons. All right. Here we go. Moved by Craig. seconded
Madam
by
Mayor?
Yes.
Before you go on, Philip just made a good point. We need to give direction in that deferral so staff know exactly what they're supposed to come back with in May.
It does say costing and
Costing.
budget impacts.
So that doesn't give direction to staff to do anything,
It says and further that council
but you defer the
decides.
motion.
Can I just ask for clarification? I guess that I agree. Like, I think if for us to bring back more figures than what we provided with the sort of general overview, we need some direction as to whether you want to go with the, like both meetings. There was a couple of suggestions and recommendations. I don't know if there's any of those you want us to explore. Are we just going with both Committee of Adjustment and council meetings at 6 o'clock? We can provide better figures on that. We provided some, Michael put some figures together with those dollar values. So I'm not sure what additional or more detailed information you want from that. So yes, some more direction might be useful for Michael and myself.
Okay. Craig?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I agree with Cindy. Like what I read on my computer, I seen what the financial impacts of changing it was already in our package.
That was a rough draft, I think, for the basic discussion, but I think that number is actually higher than that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That's why I think staff wants to provide more detailed costing that's for real. Cindy?
So seeing how I've put forward the motion, I would like to see that it broke down between the cost for council meetings and the cost for Committee of Adjustments, the two different meetings just separately, so that we kind of know where we are with each one, and then maybe just a breakdown of the exact amount of hours and how much.
Okay, Nikki and then Bill.
I would like to see a justification for how many staff come to all of our meetings. So are we in need of having as many staff at all of our meetings as we do? And as like further in the agenda, I'm deferring my motion to the May meeting because staff needed more time. They didn't have time. So maybe in tomorrow's procedural bylaw, I was hoping for clarity that we stand firm at saying that the managers don't come to 2 meetings a month. We stick firm that all of their business has to be ready for their 1 meeting a month that they come to, because that would cut costs down. So instead of Tyson and Chris and Michael having to come 2 or 3 meetings, they only come to 1 meeting. And if they're what they need from us is not ready, then they don't get it till the next meeting. And so costing could be looked at in a more efficient way.
Okay, Bill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to throw a fly in the ointment, we're doing this so that we get more people after hours. But what about the 10 o'clock and the 12 o'clock and the 2 o'clock meetings that we have to do? Why aren't they part of this? Why is there only 3 meetings a month and not the rest of them?
Absolutely.
Well, again, you would have to look at costing all of that. Philip.
So the one question that comes to mind, we talked about managers coming to these meetings and they're on salary. And you said labor laws had changed. But if you're on a salary and you're a senior manager, does your salary not mean that you show up to do the job? Because we've already agreed to additional, going from 35 to 40 hours. And if I'm not mistaken, there's an additional week of time booked in for these cases where you're coming to meetings and doing extra. So I guess I'm confused if the labor laws don't allow that and we have to then go hourly. I'd like some understanding of why that's the case.
We'd have to ask the lawyer that question, but I do know that if you work other than your regular hours and it's overtime, you can ask for compensation. You cannot be told that you have to take time off in lieu.
But when you take these jobs in a municipality, you know that council meetings are going to be part of your daily job as well.
Yeah.
So that would be, in my opinion, that's part of your salary.
It's questions for not me, but for a lawyer, a labor lawyer, who's going to cost us some money to get those opinions. Again, you have to think of quality of life for staff as well. Getting home at 8 o'clock at night, where now they're getting home at 6:37. But anyway, it's for another day. So staff will bring back options with costing for the meeting in May. Is that what we want? Yes.
Can I ask what different options?
All of them. Whatever you can think of, give us the options. Committee of Adjustment, all the meetings, council, budget meetings.
So the special meetings, because we did add some additional did some additional work today with looking at how many special meetings we have. Some of those are during the day, some of those are sort of at a regular 4 o'clock. So should we assume that those would be all in the evening as well, as opposed to during the day, to be consistent?
One of the things that the public likes is routine. If it's going to be a certain amount of time, then probably the more that you stick to the same time all the time is the way to do it.
Yes, and those numbers that we provided today, I cannot give them to council because they have names attached to them. And then that would have to be discussed in closed session.
Okay, enough on that. Council have given staff enough direction to bring more information. Cindy.
So in my motion, that wasn't part of my motion. So if they want to bring up all of the other meetings, that needs to be a new motion put forward by someone else. That's not part of my motion that I put forward.
Well, if they do it as an option when they're looking at numbers, it's just work that they're going to have done if we want that.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
But it's not part of the original motion.
No, you're right. It is meetings though. Yeah. My wrist is ringing. Okay, all right, we're going to move on to change of planning fee applications. Moved by Craig and seconded by Susan, that this report and associated attachment be received for information, and further that council directs staff to bring back a new fees and charges bylaw for planning applications for council's consideration, and further that council directs staff to provide notice of intent to pass the bylaw in Frontenac News and on the township website prior to considering passing the bylaw. Discussion. Philip, you can start us off.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did have a question. It goes back in history a little bit when we had Township Consulting doing our planning review. Did we not pass all of those fees on to the applicants at that time? So the deficit we're running today is a lot larger than what we had when we had a consultant, is what I'm thinking. And then my second part, to the fees themselves, I would suggest that we actually look at doubling the permit fee for applicants that have started construction without a permit. Just seems like they're getting off a little late for doing the wrong thing to start from. And
I have a question. Does council want to go through these one by one? Because I think to compare, it's almost like we need to negotiate what's proposed.
So that would be that through you, Madam Mayor, that would be fine. I could just address, I don't know about the consulting fees, but I can tell you a couple of things. So North Front, I'm working with all of the townships right now with respect to planning fees. And I know North Frontenac is looking at potentially putting something in their bylaw where maybe not for the committee of adjustment type applications, but for the bigger ones like rezonings and site plan, that the application fee has a maximum number of planning hours associated with it. And that when the planners spend more, because we track all of our hours for every file. And when the number of hours go above whatever that set maximum is, then they're charged an hourly rate. And the township is able to collect that through the indemnity agreement that the applicant signs on the form anyway. So there's lots of options. Ideally, yes, you want to capture as much of your costs as possible. With respect to the building without a permit, the only caution I would give is that, so legally, we cannot impose a fee as a penalty because the planning application is technically separate from any bylaw enforcement that's going on. So it would be really nice to say you pay twice as much because you've been very naughty, but legally we have to be careful that we're not merging the planning application with the bylaw enforcement potential penalty. So the reason we've put it at around $500 more is just that there is some extra work that has to go into it. Staff do extra site visits. We have extra meetings and phone calls. We've got to dig back into old records and old air photos to see what was on this. So there is some work, but that's what we've kind of put it at around $500. So we just want to be careful that And that was some legal advice that the Township of South Frontenac had got, because they've been doing this for a while. And the caution from the lawyer was that you can charge a higher fee for something that requires more work. You can't charge a higher fee just because you want to penalize somebody who's done something that they shouldn't have. If you want to penalize them through a fee or a charge, then that has to go through a bylaw enforcement process.
Okay. One of my concerns is the increases go very quickly. There's not a lot of progression, like go from $500 to $1,500. That we don't want to discourage development. And I'm afraid if we jump things too quickly, people are going to go, well, they obviously don't want us to be in their township. So I think we need to really take some time with this and think them through as to what we want to charge with each of them. Have people noted any numbers on your read through and consideration of this issue? I know I haven't, but I just don't want to see it go to $2,000 from $700. Susan.
I can't say that I have a question about a particular number, but since you're working with both North and South, and is there a reason why we're not charging the same fees across the county?
So through you, Madam Mayor. So we sort of all started out on the same basis. South kind of they have their own planning department. So they were kind of out of the gate first and ahead of us. So we've really been working with North Central and the islands as well. And so the chart you see in front of you, when I did it originally, I gave the same copy to all three townships. And then what I've done since then is I've worked with each individual set of township staff. And each township has made some changes based on what they think would be preferable. So, yeah, so it's entirely up to you. I know some townships want to be the same as their neighbors so that they can be seen to be competitive. And again, just to reiterate what is in the report, this isn't about trying to discourage development. It's about trying to cover your costs, right? And I know you've been through a budget process. I know there's only so much you can tax your property owners for. And so ultimately, one of your only other avenues for increased revenue is through user fees and charges. And for planning applications, when the application benefits only one property or one owner, the idea is that owner should bear the cost of that service. Just because you have a lower fee or you have no fee at all, the cost of the service doesn't go away. And when I say cost of the service, it's not just the planning services and the agreement that we have with the township, but your own township staff spend a lot of time, dealing with applications and processing them and putting together agendas and minutes. So again, because what happens is if you don't come closer to covering those administrative and planning costs through the user fee, it's just coming out of your general revenue, right? So I know that there's the concern that you don't want to burden individual property owners, but you also have to remember that you also don't want to burden your general tax base when it is already stretched very thin. So.
Okay. Questions or comments? Nikki, go ahead.
So back to your original question, Sonia. I see North Frontenac and South Frontenac charge for a pre-application consultation fee. You didn't put a proposed fee in there. We've heard many times that they spend a lot of time talking to an applicant before they get their application even in. Is that something we want to look at? And then I have a second question after that.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So to answer that, so under the first column under blue proposed fee, so so these are your proposed fees. And so we're proposing $100 for committee of adjustment type applications. And then the larger applications would be $300. So yes, right now, I mean, statistically, pre-application is very important because it helps us help an applicant put in the best possible application and submission. But right now it's a very expensive free service. We do spend a lot of time. I think in the report here, of the 1,059 hours from planning's perspective that we spent on your services in 2022, almost 36% of that was either pre-application consultation and or just, general planning inquiries. So very important work, but it's not being covered in any way. So I would say $100 and $300 isn't cost recovery. But it is something that helps towards the cost of the services. And those numbers that I mentioned were just our planning hours. It doesn't include the amount of time that your township staff also spend helping applicants before they even submit the application. So.
Second question follows Philip's, about not I understand what you're saying about not penalizing, but in a minor variance after building without a permit, you're suggesting 1,700, but most of the other two proposed costs that are already there for South Frontenac are over 2,000. So should we not be looking to be about the same?
Through you, Madam Mayor, again, so what was in proposed, I was trying to be like, so their minor variance is, well, you're right, it's about the same. So again, it's entirely up to you. I mean, what we've brought to you is our research that we've done on the other municipalities and what we think is an appropriate fee level. But it's, I'm not here to offer a planning opinion. It really administratively is up to you what you want to charge. And if you think that, $500 is not sufficient to cover, say, both planning time and township staff time, and you want to increase that, that would be fine, as long as it is justified, right? And and today we're not asking you to pass a bylaw or say, an absolute yes or no to these numbers. We're just kind of looking for some direction on what to put in the draft bylaw. So if you had said to me, okay, so for the minor variance and the rezoning for somebody who builds without a permit, we think it should be more, then we can take that back and we can do some more research as to, what those costs are, because at the end of the day, as long as we can justify the increased fee as relate it back to the work that needs to be done on files like that, then that's totally possible. We can bring that information back.
Okay. So that's good to know, Sonia, because I think we could each sit down and put down some numbers that we think we would like to see, and then see if we can come to some kind of a consensus. Bill?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that's also something that Mr. Dillon and Ms. Neto should be involved with, because they're the ones doing the work.
Yes. I think Crystal's probably been involved with this, has she, Cindy? Yeah. I don't know about Andy so much.
I think Andy's more on the building permit side, so his involvement's mostly through the fees charged through the building bylaw, but he's been looped into the conversations as well.
Okay. So we can pass this bylaw tonight, and we can still, the motion that's in front of us, and we can still spend some time putting our suggested numbers together. And I would say send those off to Cindy, and she can collate those and see if there's some consensus on ups or downs in different types of permits. Is that
Madam Mayor?
reasonable?
So I think the way it's worded right now is that the direction is to bring back a fee and charges bylaw for consideration. So we might want to change it if you'd want to give us more direction in terms of what fees need to be in that bylaw. Or do you want us to bring back the bylaw with the fees that we've set out today and then debate the bylaw?
I think we'd like to look at those fees closer.
Okay.
Is that what I'm hearing? Craig?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just for clarity, but you guys took the time to involve staff in research to get all these numbers based on the time it takes staff to do all this stuff, correct?
That's correct. So I can't speak to the township staff. We did ask them to look at it from their perspective in terms of their costs. On the planning side, when we track our hours using a software program called Harvest. So we have sections for each of the townships that we provide services for. Within that, each project or file or application we gets its own number and name. And then within that, there's various subtasks. So I could tell you how long I spent writing a report for this file, so we can break it down quite a bit. What we have provided here are averages, the proposed fee are averages that we feel are going to sufficiently cover the planning costs, which are, you know, sort of an out-of-pocket expense. And in some cases will also cover the township staff costs. It's most municipalities, it's rare to have 100% cost recovery, you know, unless you're the city of Toronto and you're charging $50,000 for an official plan amendment, which, you know, most municipalities do not do. Most municipalities try and get to around 40 to 50% cost recovery, you know, for their services. So we have tried to take the time to look at with our software. So I can tell you that, you know, last year we spent 200 hours writing reports. So the other thing that I would say, in addition to looking at our hours and looking at sort of helping to increase your revenue, which will help pay for the planning services, and therefore that frees up money in your general revenue. We are also trying to look at other efficiencies on the planning services side. So we had been to see you the end of last year to talk about the community planning permit system. So that's going to take a while to put in place, but that will offer some efficiencies in the future. And in the next couple of months, we hope to be back to have a conversation with you about delegated authority for undisputed consents, which I think you heard about South Frontenac's experience that they've had over the last 3 years. So we're trying to come at this from a sort of a multi-pronged perspective in terms of trying to find some efficiencies in time savings and therefore cost savings, but also helping you increase your revenues so that more of the costs associated with applications are being paid for by the applicant.
Yeah, and that's perfect. I just don't want people going away just coming back saying, I think that's too high or too low, with no real explanation of why, just because more of Craig Middleton just thinks somebody shouldn't have to pay that, because you guys have already did the research to come up with these numbers to make it what we need in order to make it cover itself.
Yeah. And so I mean, I can tell you right now for committee of adjustment applications, so for minor variances, permissions and consents, we spend about an average of 6 to 7 hours per file. Now that doesn't include site visits or actual committee meetings, because we end up tracking that as sort of one meeting. I'm going to talk to my team about seeing if we can divvy that up and make sure it's allocated to each individual file. It's just a little bit more cumbersome to manage. But again, we also looked at the number of hours and how much your planning fees were for this year. And it comes out to about $120 an hour for planning services, which is just on the lower end of even a consulting fee. So we're able to kind of use those averages to help predict, you know, how much these applications are going to cost. And there's always outliers. I mean, I did a minor variance in North Frontenac last year that we spent over 45 hours on, and well above the average of 6 to 7 hours of minor variance. So there's always some applications are very quick and easy, and some are much more complicated. And so you kind of try and find that balance.
Okay, Philip, and then Susan, and then Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have 2 questions now. I thought I heard you say that these changes would cover the county costs. So I just didn't think those numbers are changing significantly enough to cover $120,000 worth of fees. And the second question I had was, you mentioned that you're not including site visits or committee of adjustment meetings in that 1,000 hours that we've been quoted.
So three, Madam Mayor. So for the last one, they are included in your overall hours. They're not necessarily just broken down by file number all of the time. And your previous question, so the $120,000 is it's an average spread over 3 years. And it also includes work that's been done on your official plan, the Scarborough Lake School Site redevelopment. So it's the percentage attributed to development applications, I think was about 76% of that total. So it was around 92 to 95,000. I'm not remembering. Yeah. So some of your costs are associated with some of the bigger policy projects that we're working on for you, but the ones that, oh, thank you, Cindy. Yeah. So basically, 72% of your 2023 billable rate is what we've estimated is going to be for development applications. We don't know how many applications we're going to get this year, but if we take last year's number and we extrapolate it this year at 72%, that's $92,800.
So I appreciate that, but so you're saying the new fees will cover $92,000? Not
necessarily, because it depends on how many we get. And as I said, so the charge you receive in a year is based on the previous 3 years average. Sorry, Cindy. So, it's not an exact science. And it's not, I mean, it's not going to be 100% cost recovery. In a ballpark, I would have to do some more math and bring that back in another report, because I'm afraid I would give you an incorrect number at this point.
Okay.
But I mean, so sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, I guess that's my question is, do you want to know what it would cost? I mean, I think there's some people tonight who are a little bit concerned at the increase that we are proposing. Would you be okay if we had to propose more?
I think back to my original question was when we used the consultants, I think we were probably neutral on our planning costs for the most part.
Yeah.
So if we're continuing with a deficit, I don't know, maybe it's a bigger question about the whole planning process in general. How do we work it, and
To get more money.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I don't know what those costs are. I do know with my director, Mr. Gallivan, he was here prior to us taking over the services. He has seen some of the bills, and the bills that those applicants received were far in excess of the few $1,000s that these applications would be. And so another option is, and I can report back on how it goes, but I'm in North Frontenac on Friday to talk to them about the same thing. And they would like to try and cap an application. Like, so if you apply for a minor variance application and it's $1,200, that $1,200 gets you 20 hours of the planner's time, right? And when you go over the 20 hours, we track it, we're going to charge you a per hour rate in addition to the application fee.
And maybe that's more.
So
Might be a good thing to look at.
So,
then
and
the
it also,
really
I also
complicated
think you can
ones.
kind of, then if you're a little bit uncertain about some of the numbers might seem high, then maybe you lower them by $500 or $400, and then, but you also lower the number of hours. Like, I mean, we can finesse it in any way that you want, but I know North Frontenac has had a couple of very large complex applications, and they are well past recouping their planning costs. So they had asked me that question of can we cap it? So I went back last year and I was able to tell them, that's how I know that last year we spent approximately 6 to 7 hours on each of the committee of adjustment applications, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but you can kind of figure out what that average is. And then, like I said, we track our hours. And if it's just that we need to be a little bit more judicious and make sure that, each property has the site visit hours attached to it, then that's fine. We can do that. And then you're getting more of that cost recovery without overly penalizing simple, straightforward applications that aren't going to go over that amount.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Susan and then Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And yes, that makes a lot of sense to me too. Just looking at the footnotes to the comparison chart, North Frontenac already has fees for the chief building official and fire to do site inspections, and are adding a $60 fee for a site visit by Public Works. Does Central Frontenac want to suggest something similar?
We don't charge that right now.
No, but if we're looking at ways to recover costs or manage costs, it seems like a good thing to do.
As long as we're not discouraging people to contact those inspectors or the managers to come and look and do the things that need to be done.
Through you, Madam Mayor. No, I think the intent would be in conjunction with a planning application or some kind of proposal, right? Especially if we had a proposal and we sent the drawing or the sketch in the application to, say, the fire department, and they were able to say by looking at it, it's okay, we don't have any concerns. But then they say, but maybe they do have a concern and they don't know unless they go out on site. Then that money is intended to cover the cost of, particularly of their mileage and their time.
Again, this is the time to be looking at all of these things. Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Something completely different. On the one page, it talks about the draft plan of subdivision / condominium, and the proposed deposits are greater than the fee. Was there a reason for that?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So this is just through my experience working with the Township of South Frontenac. I know the other townships have not experienced a lot of plans of subdivision or plans of condo. But we expect that that may change when things move forward with communal services and it makes servicing options open up. They are very complicated, complex applications. And although technically the county is the approval authority, the final agreement is between the developer and the township, right? So for instance, the example that I have is working with South Frontenac. I work very collaboratively with their staff on reviewing all of the documents. The county takes responsibility for having a peer review done of a hydrogeological report, which is for the well water and the groundwater quality. But there are going to be a lot of other technical studies for those kinds of developments, whether it's traffic impact, terrain analysis for septic. Those often fall to the township to provide comments to the county on. And if the township does not have staff that have that skill set to review those engineering reports, then you are often on the hook for hiring your own peer reviewer. So the deposits are intended to help cover some of those costs.
Okay. Okay, the motion before us, do we want to defer this and come up with some other options? Definitely what I heard tonight was the one that we set a basic fee and then an additional fee for the more complicated ones is something that I think see the nods of as a good common sense. So does anybody want to move deferral of this and we'll get more information from staff?
Just send it that way because you can just put deferred.
We have to vote for deferred though, right? Or I can. Okay, moved by Philip, seconded by Craig, that we defer the decision and bring it back. Is the second week of May soon enough? Or too soon?
It's a little too soon and I might be off for the second meeting in May. So I'll have to talk to Cindy and just see.
Okay.
And it's also too, there was some discussion about people providing questions or concerns about specific numbers.
Yes.
So if that's still going to occur, are we giving a time frame for people to give Cindy those comments? Just to help us kind of frame the window that we're going to be working in here.
I would say in the next 2 weeks, council, is that reasonable? Since it's fresh in our minds, that we send any comments or numbers to Cindy that she can have that in front of her. I don't see anybody saying no. So let's say in 2 weeks, so that hopefully sooner than later that will come in and then you can go from there and bring it back when you're ready to bring it back.
Okay, and we'll do some more number crunching. And like I said, I still have, you guys are sort of the first that I've talked to. I know South has been through their whole process and I watched their meetings, but I wasn't directly involved. But I'm also going to North Frontenac and I'm also going to Frontenac Islands. And somewhere along the way, I may hear some more good ideas that I can bring back.
So we'll wait until you have all those good ideas to bring
That's
back to
perfectly
us.
fine. So this is just sort of a first meeting to kind of introduce our research. So we definitely want you guys to be on a good path with your budget. But you need to be comfortable with the new numbers that you pass, because I recognize that it's been 15 years and we are asking for some very significant increases in some cases.
Yeah.
But there are some decreases.
There are some decreases. That's a good point. I was going to point out. So site plan control right now is about $3,200 and that's all site plan control.
Yeah.
And that's a very expensive application for, say, a very small business. So for instance, we're proposing to have a lesser fee for, let's see, minor applications would be $1,500 and major applications would be $2,500. They would each have deposits. And against the deposits, I think we would try and word that in the bylaw that they would maybe be at the discretion of the clerk, depending on the complexity of the application. So it wouldn't be an automatic deposit each time. But that is one of the key decreases because, and I think that is something that it's very important to have from sort of a health and safety and how is a site laid out. But $3,200 for all businesses seems to be a little bit onerous. So there are some decreases as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so the motion is to defer this to a future meeting. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Very good. Thank you, Sonia and Cindy, for all your work. All right, now we are at Public Works. Crack ceiling. We have a motion moved by Susan and seconded by Craig that South Frontenac Township has secured unit pricing by method of tender to procure a contractor to perform crack seal applications in South Frontenac Township. And further, that council approve the recommendation of the Public Works Manager to use the non-competitive purchasing method from the township's procurement policy governing the purchasing of goods and services to enter into a contract with Road Last Asphalt and Sealing Maintenance at the same unit price as South Frontenac Township. And further, that the Public Works Manager be directed to issue a purchase order for a net amount of $153,525.21, and that the mayor and CAO clerk be authorized to sign the formal contract documents. Discussion? Philip?
So Madam Mayor, I have a couple questions. Are we doing more sealant than South Frontenac? Their tender was for 92K and we're coming in at 153K. And obviously the price was by meter. And I was curious if we're doing more and we had bid, or if we had tendered with South Frontenac, would we got a better price based on the fact of the volume between the two municipalities? And then I have another question in regards to what part of the non-competitive purchasing does this actually fall under? Because it talks about monopoly or specialized experience or knowledge.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Smith, it is possible we could have got better pricing from going in joint tender with South Frontenac had we had our budget approved sooner and made the decision for removing the preservation sooner. I don't think so with those quantities, with those volumes. I think they have pretty standard pricing for priced by the region with those unit prices. But I can't see it having much of an impact on the price, but it's possible. Can you repeat the second question, please?
The part of the procedural bylaw that allows this.
I'll have to get further clarification from our treasurer. He's kind of the one who steered which part of the procurement policy to go with. But to simplify, before Michael speaks to that, basically South Frontenac has gone through a proper tender process. Their tenders are very tight and they do an excellent job with that. And we've been given lots of confidence that they have a really strict procedure or procurement bylaw as well. So we have lots of trust in their tender process and in their bylaw. So Michael helped me fit that into our procurement bylaw. So I'll let him speak to that.
Okay.
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Smith, the second part of that first one where it said is more cost effective or beneficial for the township. So if we were to go out to the tender process right now, I believe it would be more expensive than going with this price. That's what.
Non-competitive. You talk.
Go ahead, Philip.
Sorry, because what's in the report, it says non-competitive purchasing, non-competitive contracting may be justified under the following set of criteria, which includes but is not limited to when there is statutory or market-based monopoly on the item or where the supply of a particular good or service is recommended because it is more cost-effective benefits to township. So that's where you're saying that's what falls into that section, because the other part then is when specialized experience, knowledge, or expertise is required.
Yes, because what we've done is pulled out that whole section and pasted it in, and maybe we could have highlighted or underlined that other part, but that is, as it appears in the procurement policy, is that whole section rather than taking just a piece out. We put the whole piece in.
And I think with us being able to see what all of the contractors bid in South Frontenac, we can look at the competitiveness of the bids, and this was the best price of them all. So it was competitive.
And just for also for council's ease of mind, it's great that they were the lowest bidder, and we know that it's competitive pricing. The number one advantage for us, the reason we were interested in trying to procure this contractor is because there's no better proof of their product when it comes to a product like crack sealing. Poor application, as you drive down any road, you see the crack seal get rolled out of the joints a year later or 2 years later, and then we're just throwing money away. But this is the same contractor that performed our crack sealing years ago, and multiple public works managers and public works staff in the Frontenac County or even LNA County have commented on how good of a job they've done on 38. And in that same year, in that same contractor doing crack sealing for other townships is quite reputable. It's held up really well. So.
And how many kilometers are we doing?
Our goal, so the unit pricing was actually even lower than what we budgeted. So it's a tough one to estimate because it's by the meter, but you have to literally wheel every meter to get it accurate. So they try to do 3 cracks per meter. It's a long process for estimating, but this is we were just under being able to do the entire road 38. And this is out of the pavement preservation budget, as you know. And there's so if we actually might have a little bit of wiggle room to do the whole 38, depending on other items as they come through and finalize. So we were hoping to only do 3/4 of 38. And it really comes down to how many we're going to have our junior inspector on the wheel, making sure that we're measuring really well, because it may get us the entire 38 just as it is, depending on the actual linear meters of cracks.
Good, good. Sealing those cracks are very important.
I don't want to get council's hopes up, but we know that the contractor was conservative with their estimate. We're crossing our fingers, hoping that we would obviously come back and approach council again first to see whether they want to choose cost savings or more meters. But we have an idea that it may be more than that, and might even take a look at some of Wagerville Road as well.
Good. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right. We have a motion moved by Dan Meek, seconded by Bill Everett. Whereas Central Frontenac Public Works joined South Frontenac Public Services joint tender to procure contractor unit pricing for the 2023 surface treatment program. And whereas tender PS 2023-12 was released on February the 22nd, 2023, and bid submissions were received on March 22nd, 2023. And whereas the Public Works Manager has reviewed the bids and has evaluated according to the criteria outlined in the tender and is recommending to award the Central Frontenac portion of the tender to Miller Paving as the successful contractor. Now, therefore, be it resolved that council award Miller Paving Limited as the successful bidder in the amount of $91,240.38, including HST, and further that the Public Works Manager be authorized to issue a purchase order for the work. Discussion, Nikki.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tyson, which road will get the surface treatment for 91,000?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Gowdy, I knew that question was coming, and I had my Excel sheet up and then it seemed to close, but it just loaded again. So just be patient with me for 1 second here. As long as Noah hasn't updated this, because this is still my one from budget, that will be Wemp Road, 600 meters on Wemp Road, 1,200 meters on Westgate Road, 800 meters on Elgin Young. But I actually think we've added to that because of unit pricing coming in better than estimated, but I can provide that to council shortly after this meeting with more accurate, but it's multiple roads. The same ones that were presented during the budget.
Okay. All those in favor? Carried. Great. Anything else for Public Works? Nothing? Cindy?
So Tyson, I got a little excited. I see some red tape. Are we getting the Arden Road ready? How are we doing with that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Kelsey, the Arden Road and Westport Road are, Noah asked me today when I can carve out some time to go over the final construction drawings. He's been, that's something else he's done in-house for us, so we don't have to pay a consultant. So hoping to get those out. Obviously, we can't award, we wouldn't be able to bring it to the May 9th meeting, but shooting for possibly the second meeting in May to award if we can have it advertised long enough. But there's not a big panic for those to get them out, because due to the turtles and turtle eggs in the shoulder of the roads, we can't start those projects until later in June anyways. So we still shoot to start them in June.
I have a follow-up question. So Kennebec Road, is that a road that you can have your staff have a look at? It's basically a garbage dump. There's garbage diapers and bottles. It starts at the Henderson Road and it runs probably 1 kilometer in. And as far back as you can see in the bush, I know bylaw has been asked, but nothing seems to be happening. You really should have maybe somebody go up even with a loader and that's how much there is. And load it up in a dump truck or something somewhere because it's bad.
Absolutely. Madam Mayor and I were speaking about this before the meeting and just today it's been brought to my attention again. So probably with the snow melt, it's been quite obvious. So does any councillors have any more suggestions unless we budget to do a project ourselves where we have to get equipment in there and excavate it out of the ditches, but.
Okay, Craig?
Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, push it again.
Police on this guy? Like this homemade dump thing that's going on in Kennebec, like, I mean.
The guy is an absent landlord, as far as I'm aware.
Thank you. So it's vacant land. It's not a rented or leased piece of property. There's been waste on that land for quite a few years. And actually in the fall, I went and I walked the property and you can walk back. There's like a ridge. It is as big as the Oldham dump site. Okay, so for us to fix this, we're looking at some major money. So whatever the boys could do would probably help because it is as far as you can see. So you guys should go and look at it. It's wild.
Well, we can't enter private property unless we have an order to do that. Bylaw has to go and then an order is given to clean up. Chris, help me out here. If that doesn't happen, then we can enter on the property. We can clean it up and put it on the tax bill. But if it's a vacant piece of property, chances are you'd never get your money back. But I did have a call today from the lady who called me initially saying that if something wasn't soon done, they were going to start talking to the media about it. So we need to go back and do some work. Cindy and then Lynn.
Okay, so it was already on social media on the weekend. And the lady, yeah, I know the lady, she spoke to me too. But I don't know what you're going to do with it. It really is crazy. Yeah. But bylaw has been notified more than once. So it's not like it's a new thing, but nothing seems to ever happen.
Okay, Lynn and then Craig.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I was just going to say, I read all of the social media posts about it over the weekend and it was quite detailed.
The very sad part, I've got one on my road. Any place the road is close to a ravine, people are throwing garbage over the hillside. So unless the owners of the property fence it or put up cameras to catch people, it's just very sad that people would do that. Yeah, well, if we can catch them doing it, we can certainly find them. But again, without cameras and license plate numbers, how do you figure out who's doing it? Philip?
Thank you, Madam. That was going to be one of my suggestions. Can either the municipality get a camera so we can try to get some photos of who's dumping and pass them on to bylaw enforcement, or ask bylaw enforcement to do it themselves? I mean, we pay them to do that work.
Yeah. I heard the one on Henderson Road is now attracting people from Cloyne bringing garbage in. That was the. Yeah. Susan?
Why hasn't the bylaw enforcement officer done anything? Or provided at least a report to us?
Basically, and Chris can speak to this as well. First of all, we didn't know who owned the property. I think we figured that out now, who owns the property, and a letter was sent, I believe, and there's been no response. And bylaw was out and looked at it last year, I believe. Craig.
Yeah, I was once driving down Highway 7 and threw a cigarette butt out my window and a cop charged me $55 for littering. I would think this is a case of people littering on somebody's property. Not as much as a like, how are we going to pay to clean up this mess?
That can cost thousands and
Like-
thousands of
No, but
dollars.
how are we gonna afford it? We have no money.
Yeah.
Like, how can we afford to send public works out there to hand pick ditches?
Well,
Because the cops won't go and charge people. Or, but I mean, like, how's it come back to us? That's what I'm struggling with. I don't know what the answer is.
right. Okay, Nikki.
My question is more or less maybe to Chris or Cindy, but we pay bylaw money to go out, but we have to helm bylaw to keep going back for the same complaint. I put a complaint in on the Godfrey Road last fall. They finally did, it took 3 times complaining to get the follow through, and finally a letter was given to these people last Monday. So where are we dropping the ball with bylaw, I guess is my question. So maybe it goes on to Susan's question and on to Craig's question. We as a council are paying these people and we're responsible to our residents. So where's the problem in this? So how can we fix it?
Well, maybe we could ask Chris and Donna to do a report. Basically, council has not received reports on the specifics of bylaw infractions, which is, I guess, public information. But maybe we need to step up our enforcement and say to the people enforcing, we expect action on these cases and not just go back and try to avoid it. Okay.
Madam Mayor, what Public Works can do is get more recent photos. I think we'll have to check on putting a camera on property that's not ours, but I didn't mean people are dumping on property that's not theirs. So I'm okay with that's a pretty small expense if we want to give the camera a try, but I just Public Works will make this a priority to whether we're working with fire bylaw, we'll look into it for sure.
Okay, good. Good. Bill?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, it might be a long shot, but if there's any mineral resources on that land, it will be registered with M&R. And they do quite often enforce cleanups.
Okay, something to look into. Okay, that is it then for Public Works. Thank you, Tyson. We're going to move on to committee reports. Moved by Bill Everett, second by Dan Meeks, that the minutes of the Kennebec Recreation Committee meeting held March the 6th, 2023 be received for information. Anything to add to the Kennebec Rec Committee? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Moved by Dan and seconded by Bill that the minutes of the District 4 Recreation Committee held March 15th, 2023 be received for information. Anything to add, District 4?
The committee would like some clarification. If they understand that Philip cannot be a member of that committee as he is a member of the Central Rec Committee, but the question is, if I'm unable to attend, is Philip allowed to attend in my spot to answer any questions?
No. Not if Philip is going to be at an arm's length at the Central Frontenac Committee, which he needs to be.
Okay.
If they have something that they need a counselor, they could call the mayor. I could go as ex officio.
Well, you said you were gonna attend. So third Wednesday
you
of
go.
every month, they meet at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
They would love to see you.
All right. There you go. All right. All those in favor of the motion? I'll need a schedule of when everybody meets. I've never gotten that. All right, moved by Bill, seconded by Dan, that the minutes of the District 2 Recreation Committee meeting held March 5th, 2023 be received for information. Anything to add, Dan? I heard you had a great spaghetti supper.
We did. We had a lot of people out and a lot of spaghetti was ate. We also having good luck with our euchres, between 35, 40 people every Monday night. So it's a great turnout. Everybody's having fun and the community's getting involved too.
Excellent.
So it's really good. And I wanted to say something to Tyson. That was good to see all of our new equipment doing the nice ditching along the roads. Doing a good job there.
Yes. Okay, all right. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Dan, seconded by Bill, that the minutes of the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority Board meeting held March the 13th, 2023 be received for information. Any discussion, comments? All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Nikki and seconded by Philip. There's nothing on this motion, but that we accept the correspondence as listed 1 to 13. We got busy listing all the correspondence and didn't put any words in. All those in favor? Carried. All right, bylaws. Moved by Philip and seconded by Nikki, that bylaw 2023-21 being a bylaw to amend Schedule A of bylaw number 2002-125 as amended for the naming and or renaming of public highways and private lanes, and to amend bylaw 2005-197 being a bylaw to establish and assume a public highway be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this 25th day of April 2023. Discussion, all those in favor? Carried. All right. We have a motion moved by Nikki and seconded by Philip that the motion from Councillor Gowdy for the public works staff to stagger their work week be deferred until the May 9th, 2023 meeting to allow staff time to research and prepare a report. Discussion, all those in favor? Carried. Great. Oh, we don't have a mover on that one. It's cold in here.
No, it is.
Okay, we have a motion moved by Dan and seconded by Philip that the notice of motion from Councillor Clegus to reduce the speed limit on Arden Road to 50 kilometers from the Price Road to Almond Lane be considered reasonable, and further that staff be directed to bring back a bylaw to the next meeting to amend bylaw 2023-43 as amended, being a bylaw to create speed zones for consideration. Discussion. Philip.
I'm fine with the motion, but I just wanted to ask about the process because I know when we've done speed reductions in other areas, we've asked staff to comment on those. So I don't know if staff has actually looked at this and they're okay with the 50 kilometer speed limit, or we're kind of skipping a step and council's dictating what we want the speeds to be.
Maybe Tyson could come to the mic and speak to that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Smith, we're comfortable with the speed change.
Okay, it's reasonable.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes, Cindy?
Just a question. So if we move the speed limit, does that make the hamlet start at Price Road? Is that when we put the speed limit down to the same speed as what the hamlet is now? So does that move the boundary to there?
No, it just means the speed is slowing them down sooner. So by the time they hit the hamlet, they're actually doing the right speed.
So how do you know where the hamlet is then?
The
Where's the start
hamlet's-
of the hamlet of the village?
The official plan designates it more so than anything else. It's wherever we want it to be.
Okay, so my concern was that if it makes the hamlet further out, then Glenn Matson's farm is within a hamlet, which is against the bylaws. So I just want to make sure that we don't, right? Because it would be a farm within the hamlet, which you're not allowed to have.
But it's existing.
We weren't going to do grandfather stuff. I'm just throwing it out there. So
Well,
we have all.
we have to accept what's existing. Lynn?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. There is a further speed reduction once you get right into the hamlet to 40 kilometers an hour. So I don't know if that's where you would
I just want to
consider
make
it.
sure that, afterwards, something doesn't happen with the Matson's farm because we changed the speed.
Mhm.
I just want us to be
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah, it shouldn't, Cindy.
Okay.
The hamlet's not identified by the speed. it makes sense that the speed should be lower in a hamlet, but.
Okay.
Bill, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, Madam Mayor, that changing the speed does not change anything else. You can have multiple speeds on any road.
Okay, all right. So all those in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. All right, good. Now we are at public meetings bylaws. They did. Notice of motions. We have summer hours that we've dealt with already. Reduction of speed limit, we've done. Giving of notice of motion.
There's none.
New or other business.
No.
Philip?
Can I just ask about cemetery maintenance? The Oconto Cemetery, there's a bunch of trees down, cedar trees came down in the last ice storm. And I know there's been a number of calls about getting those trees removed. And I know the last time we inquired about removing trees, it took months and months. So I don't know if this is something Public Works can actually help with cemeteries and clean up the brush that's down.
And you said that was in Oconto?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Tyson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Smith. Public Works is pretty strapped right now for ditching, grading and all that kind of stuff, but I could make a call shortly after this meeting and have it cleaned up in no time by I imagine that's what Donna would do if she were here anyways, get a contractor to do it, but whatever council wants.
I guess the question is there money in the budget to get a contractor to do
I
it?
would imagine there is some money in the budget for cleanup and to deal with the contractor. I think the last time it was just that it was taking time to get the contractor because they were so busy.
Sorry.
As long as you're comfortable with it, Madam Mayor, I could get a contractor to probably clean it up as early as tomorrow or the next day.
Should we ask the current should we contact the current contractor that's doing the cemeteries first before we reach out
Yes,
and have
absolutely.
another contractor, just so that we're not ruffling anybody's?
Yeah, absolutely. The
Yeah.
Youngs.
Yeah.
I
that's
just
a
don't
good
want it to be
point.
months again, because I mean, this is not the first time there's been trees that it's taken forever.
I go by that, and see any, but I wasn't looking, like.
Well, there's a clump of cedar trees and that's where in underneath. No, I know, but
Okay, Susan has her hand up.
Just a thought, we did receive funding for I'm going to get the name wrong, Del Roque, the windstorm.
Yeah.
So I would think that, when trees are down, would we be able to make use of those funds
Yes.
for the contractor?
Already spent. Fire Chief, Chris, were the funds that you billed for the storm last summer not expenses we'd already incurred and we were just recouping those expenses?
I can speak to it.
This is why we need staff here, variety.
So we have up to $32,000 for debris cleanup, I think is what the words had there. We had 17 that we submitted and there were other costs that I was going to talk to the department heads about. This could certainly fall under that one. And then there's 114,000 for infrastructure. So sides of the buildings or whatever other structure that was needing to be repaired. So yes, some costs were already spent in 2022. We have to find those invoices, send them to the ministry, and then other new ones as they come up, send that on to get that up to $150,000 back.
I think there's a couple of trees on the school property that bent over even more that the wind affected that we need to cut.
So
That's just an aside. Okay, so it'll be looked after. All right. So that's all the new or other business. So now we're moving into the closed session and I'll read a motion moved by Nikki and seconded by Philip that council resolve into closed session under section 239(2) of the Municipal Act to discuss matters relating to one, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, section 239(2)(b). All those in favor? Carried. Do you want to have a 5-minute